every single mock that you have done has the Colts taking an offensive lineman. However, many others I've seen have the Colts taking a tight end first at pick number 14. And that's actually the strong favorite at minus 115. Offensive line is plus 325 at Caesars. I'm seeing tight end as low as minus 115 at Caesars. I'm seeing offensive line as high as plus 325 also at Caesars right now. Do you think offensive line is worth a bet there, considering you've had them taking offensive line in every single one of your mocks? Might there be some value there at plus 325?
Yeah, I do. This is a fun one to talk about because there's some good trends. Chris Ballard's obviously been there a long time, so we have a pretty good idea of what he's looking for in the draft. Now, I'll address the tight end thing right off the bat because it's realistic. Even though I haven't mocked it there, it's realistic. Tyler Warren, if for some reason he were to fall, I think he would be an option for them. I think they may even just run to the podium with that pick. That may be their target. It's just that I don't think he's going to be there. So that's one of the reasons why I don't have them taking a tight end. Colston Loveland is the other possibility, but he doesn't really fit a lot of their trends, especially since he hasn't tested because of the injury. We don't really know what kind of athlete he would test as. We think he's a really good athlete, but does he meet the Colts thresholds as far as their athletic testing numbers? I don't know for sure, and I'll get into that a little bit now because Ballard has two very strong trends at the beginning of drafts. He likes older, more mature players, which is a little bit different than a lot of GMs. There's definitely some teams that are almost exclusively drafting guys who are, 3 years in college, 20 or 21 years old. Ballard's the opposite. He wants guys who've been in college for 4 or 5 years. 9 of his last 12 first and second round picks have spent at least 3 years in college. So he likes the older players. Also, 9 of his last 12 first and second round picks have had a 9.0 or higher relative athletic score, often abbreviated as RAS. If you're on social media, I'm sure you've seen people tweeting about it and whatnot. Basically, it looks at your athleticism relative to your size and relative to your position, sort of gauge, like, everything else being equal, what type of athlete are you compared to your peers? The Colts love older players. They love the best athletes with the early round picks. If we look at everybody the Colts could potentially draft and just sort of apply those two things, there's really only 2 guys that jump out. They're both offensive linemen. Gray Zabel from North Dakota State, 9.5 RAS, 5 years in school. Donovan Jackson, 9.6 RAS, 4 years in college. Now, both of those guys might be considered a little bit of a reach, but they're likely first-round picks. It also fits the Colts' needs. They have an immediate need at right guard. Zabel and Jackson can both play guard. They also have a potential long-term need at right tackle because Braden Smith is in the final year of his contract, sort of uncertain what they would do. Zabel and Jackson can both play tackle as well. So to get a guy who is, has some position versatility and allows the Colts to maybe fill guard immediately, but then also give them the flexibility to next year play them at either guard or tackle, depending on where they can find good value in free agency or the draft next year. That flexibility would also be really appealing. So the fact that it's both a need and that they clearly hit the thresholds of the Colts draft year after year makes a lot of sense. As I mentioned, Colston Loveland, only 3 years at Michigan. We don't have any testing numbers for him. He's probably a 9.0 or higher athlete, but we don't know for sure. So without that number, I don't know that we can say for sure that he's going to be on their board because we just haven't seen him test. So I view him as more of a wild card for the Colts. I'm not as confident saying that they are going to consider him as a lot of people are plugging him into mock drafts. So offensive line seems like kind of a no-brainer to me to plug in for their mock draft, whether it's at that pick or whether they trade down a little bit. Zabel would probably be a guy they have to get at that pick because there's some teams after them that will consider him. Donovan Jackson, maybe they could trade back and feel like they could still get him. So that's a possibility for how they attack that. But I'm feeling pretty good about offensive line for the Colts as far as it being a position that clearly fits their trends and is both an immediate and long-term need.
Yeah, and there's a couple different ways, Ryan, to help a quarterback. I know the tight end is one way to help a quarterback. You can say, he might be able to block a little bit, but also he's a downfield threat. But if you need to protect that quarterback and you're sitting there and you've got Anthony Richardson and you've got Daniel Jones and they're going to be competing in the offseason for the starting role as QB1 for the Indianapolis Colts, it does make sense to try to shore up that offensive line to actually give one of these 2 guys who both are liabilities in some sense, and their ceilings are limited, especially when they're under pressure. Give those guys a little bit of time, give them a chance back there behind the offensive line to actually work the ball down the field, figure out and go through a little bit of their progression. So that certainly does seem like it's not being viewed by many as a potential for the Indianapolis Colts, but something you're looking at, and something that does provide some value there at plus 325.
Yeah, to add to that, for Anthony Richardson, what type of offensive lineman do you want? You want the best possible athletes on your offensive line. So putting a priority in getting the best athletes at the position, like a Gray Zabel, especially a guy who played tackle a lot, moves really well. It makes a lot of sense to try to plug him in there because that's the type of lineman you want. And on day 2, you're probably not going to get that type of offensive lineman. So you're not going to plug that hole with that type of an athlete unless you do it with that pick.
That's a great point. So let's see what the Colts do there, but some value at plus 325. Colts offensive lineman is their first position drafted.